Welcome back to Animate 2021. I'm here today with Robbie, and we're going to be just talking about all things animation. Following, and then on Friday is our big culmination with everybody coming in and doing real reviews for a very large chunk of time on Friday. So please get your real reviews in if you have anything that you'd like to have us look at. We're going to have animators from all over the world looking and critiquing. So please get those in as soon as possible. Again, my name is Dan. I'm the head of the animation department here at Vertex School. And today I have with me Robbie. Robbie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. It's good to be here. And yeah, my name is Robbie. I am Italian, and I have been animating for, gosh, I've lost track. I think 15 years now or 16. Yeah, since 2005. Basically, that's when my animation journey started. Um, I've been living in London in the UK for the past 15 years. I actually moved to the UK because I wanted to work in video games and films, and that was pretty much my only option because in Italy there's not much going on in the visual effects industry.
Right.
There is now a couple of studios, but back then there wasn't much. And in fact, my very first job was I was a visual effects artist. I wasn't an animator, so yeah, I kind of my whole journey started back in, I want to say, 2000 or 1999. It might sound weird, but the thing that kind of hooked me into the whole animation thing, or visual effects, I should say, was the very first Matrix film. Um,
Oh, wow.
for some
Yeah.
reason, I
That
watched
was,
that in, that was 1999, I want to say. Um,
yeah, I think it's 99.
yeah. So I watched that in the cinema, in the theater, and it was kind of, my mind was blown like probably everyone on the planet. Um, and I
Yeah.
kind of went home and I was like, I just want to understand how to do that. I just wanted to do the whole
Yeah.
thing. I was like, I want to know more about this. And back
Yeah.
then, I was already into kind of the VFX um, thing where I was buying DVDs and trying to watch all of the, behind the stage, behind the scenes kind of things, trying to find out who the big people were. I mean, the internet was there, but it wasn't that useful back then. You couldn't find that much at the time. Besides maybe a couple of like big companies and stuff. Anyways, long story short, I started to study on my own. At the time, I was still working with my father, who had his own business, so I was helping him out. And then on the side, I was going home, and I remember the first book I bought was a book about 3D Studio Max, like learning. So it was like this big, it was like a Bible, and so I started to read that through, trying to understand as much as I could about the whole process of modeling, texturing, animation, effects. Um, and I think back then the first thing that kind of um, uh, got my interest was the effects side of things, like the actual like particle simulations and stuff like that. So that was the very first thing that I was trying to study and achieve as I was reading through 3D Max. And then in Italy, there was a school that I can't remember how I discovered, but basically I found out that there was this school in the north of Italy. I'm from the south, um, where they were doing like kind of a computer uh, animation kind of program, where it was, I think it was like a introduction to Maya or something like that. That was the first time I heard about Maya. So anyway, I flew to the north of Italy. I moved there for a month, and I attended this school, which gave me kind of a generic uh, overview of Maya and what could be done. We did a short film with the whole class, which is fantastic. It was very, very cool. This was 2001. And then uh, after that, I kind of thought that I wanted to do, I wanted to get into comp mostly, like visual effects, comp and effects. My mind was not hooked on animation yet.
Right.
So I kept studying on my own, on my spare time, and then I got my first job in VFX in a small company in Naples, which is
Mm-hmm.
my hometown, where they were doing visual effects. It was like three people in the whole studio, very small. We became like best buddies in just like a couple of months, and I worked there for a year, and it was like one of the best things ever, because it was my very first job in the visual effects industry. We were doing like small, like independent movies in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
nothing, not blockbusters or anything like that. Still, it was pretty cool to me. It was like, yeah, I saw my name on TV for the first time. It's like, yeah, that was cool. Um, but then shortly after that, I kind of, for some reason, I steered into towards animation more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I started digging around. I started studying animation on my own time, like redoing the process all over again.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and then, yeah, I started studying animation. I kept studying for many years while I was still doing other things. I was still doing 3D. I started working with architects. I was doing like 3D renderings and stuff like that,
Okay. Yeah.
just to, still do like, that's another thing. I wanted to do lighting as well. That was one of the things that I loved the most.
Yeah.
So lighting and comp, they were the main things that I kind of got interested in at
Yeah.
first, and then animation slowly kind of pulled me. It was like, no, come this way. This is more interesting.
Right.
And then, yeah, and then I did there was a guy from Pixar. His name was Kyle Balda. I think he's now the one of the head people in illumination makeup in Paris, I want to say.
Okay.
I think. But anyway, he was one of the animation supervisors at Pixar, and he came to Italy for a short time to do like a small class. I attended that class, and that kind of got me hooked. I was like, I want to do animation now. That's my thing. Um, and then, yeah, a couple of years went by. I kept studying, and then eventually I got my first animation job in Italy doing TV animation for kids, for children. That was my very first job in animation, which is incredibly cool. And I got to do it from my own. It was my very first remote working experience as well, which was fascinating because this was 2005 and no 2006, I want to say, yeah. And yeah, at the time, because they were in the north, I was in the south, and again, it was like they had all of their animators. They were kind of everywhere throughout like the whole country. Like they were all, you know, north of Italy, south of Italy, pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
And we were all working from home, which was surreal now that I think about it, especially coming from the past 18 months where we forced to work from home.
Right.
And I couldn't wait to get into a studio at the time. It was like, I wanna get there and see stuff and meet people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that was my very first experience. And then at the end of 2006, I was approached by a small company in the UK. They were trying to make an animated feature, and they offered me the job, and I flew to the UK, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna work on my first animated feature.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, but that didn't go very well because it was their first attempt at doing a feature animation. It was very hard, of course, as we all know. But I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I kind of moved on because I knew that was kind of, I wasn't going anywhere in my animation journey. And then I got interested into the games industry, and then my first job was at Microsoft Rare, where I was doing. We were working on. Do you remember Dan? Do you remember the thing that the Kinect camera for the
Yes.
Xbox, where you
Yeah.
could like, I worked on the very first prototype
Oh, wow.
game that wasn't even announced yet. It was behind the scenes. I wasn't
Right.
allowed to talk about it.
Hmm.
This was like, yeah, 15 years ago. No, 11 years ago, sorry. Yeah, we were working on Kinect Sports. It was like the very first game that was supposed to come out
Hmm.
from that technology. Super fascinating. We got to try it out in the studio, and I had such a good time. I worked there for I think a year, and then yeah, the game came out. It was awesome. Like I brought it home to like play with my family back in Italy. It was surreal. Uh, and then yeah, and then after that, I kept working in games for a few years, um, uh, and then in the back of my mind, I was still kind of thinking, but I want to make films. I want to work on huge like blockbusters and stuff,
Hmm.
which kind of got me into the visual effects industry. I started doing previs first,
Okay.
which is another amazing field that for people that want to do animation. It's honestly one of uh, the most fulfilling experiences that I had working in previs, just because you get to kind of lay the ground for uh, the whole film. And like they give you storyboards and then they say, "Oh yeah, make it look cool." It's like, and you get like almost complete creative freedom,
Right.
which is amazing. And I really enjoyed working in previs.
Hmm.
Um, I was at the third floor back then. I worked there for a couple of years, and then I moved into visual effects in final animation, and I worked at DNEG, and then I worked at Framestore, and then I went to ILM, which is where I work right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically my journey. It was lots of ups and downs.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you the times where I got really frustrated and I was almost giving up. Like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that I wanna say to students. It's like, don't give up. This is something that you need to keep in like the back of your head. It's like you need to think that it's possible, it's doable, but you need to put the work in. Of course,
Yeah.
there's no
That.
other way.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the times I talk to my students about some experiences I had while I was in school learning animation. Like you, I didn't necessarily start right inside of animation right away. I actually started as a computer engineer working for the government for a period of years. And then I eventually switched over to animation kind of by happenstance. And I did the same thing. I started off with not, I wouldn't even call it modeling. I was putting like spheres and cubes into like small rooms that I made and then put lighting on them. And then I was making wallpapers and stuff like that out of those things.
Nice.
And then I eventually got into actual modeling. And then I was getting into, uh, oh my gosh, you said the word earlier, simulations,
Yeah.
animation simulations. So it was like effects, but at the same time, like I was trying to get animation to work. So I was had like, I'm sure everybody's seen those videos where like there's a ball bouncing around to audio,
Yeah.
or like there's really satisfying things where like, a cube is going by and it just happens to go right through the center of like something swinging. I was playing
Yeah.
around with stuff like that. Eventually getting into animation and then going to school for it and otherwise. But the thing that you were saying that I wanted to talk to more about, and like you had said, is like keep fighting for it and put the effort out and things like that. I mentioned to my students this story a lot, and when I was in animation school, I knew pretty much right off of the bat that I was the bottom of the barrel at the school. I had never opened, they were teaching inside of Maya. I had never seen Maya before my first day of class. I had never worked with a real character rig. I was having so many doubts on myself because I was also in there with people who are already professionals that were going through to try to brush up their skills. So I'm like looking at their work and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm terrible at this. Like I'm gonna do terrible. So right off the bat, I'd say it was probably within the first week or two. I said I'm gonna just put in more time and try to make the best stuff than anyone else in the school. Um, So I ended up, working my full-time job 40, 50 hours a week. And in the beginning, when the classes were like the heavy and light bouncing ball, squash and stretch ball and stuff like that,
Yeah.
a lot of students are putting an hour or two, something like that a week to try to get their assignments completed. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to put in 5 hours. And then as they started to get a little bit more difficult, I was having students, not I wasn't having students, but the school was having students that were putting in like 5 to 10 hours. So I was like, I'm going to put in 15 hours. And by the time I actually got out of school, I was putting in 40 to 50 hours a week of animation on top of my 40 to 50 hours a week of my regular job. Now, there was others who were just doing what they had to get the assignments done, right? So if it took them 5 hours to do the assignment, they just got it done in 5 hours. If it took me 5 hours to do the assignment, I spent the next 35 hours perfecting it, making it look better, maybe trying a different version of that same thing. So if I had a bouncing ball
Yeah.
that just went up and down and that was the assignment, now I'm going to try to make it go across the screen. Now I'm going to try to make it go across the screen and hit the wall. Now I'm going to have it go across the screen, hit the wall, and then run into another ball that's bouncing, you know? And that's the way I treated the schooling was the more I put into this, the more I'm going to get out of this. And I think animation is one of those fields where that's just going to hold true until you retire because it's changing so often. The bleeding
Yeah.
edge that everybody likes to stay on, especially in video games, that that real cutting edge stuff, it changes time and time again very, very quickly. Right now we have Unreal 5 coming out, which could change the face of games for a long period of time due to the fact that it can run um, on lower end machines, much better
Yeah.
stuff than Unreal 4 could on amazing machines. So
Yeah.
that's good. That could change the face of animation as it is. So what I really like to say is you have to continue doing that. Once you graduate, don't just throw a demo reel together of the stuff that you have completed in school. You can, but continue to animate stuff. Go back and look at old assignments that maybe you did badly on. Take, for instance, the pendulum is one of the first really, really difficult animations for new animators to work on. Go back and try doing it again. And if, and see how much better you're doing. One, that's going to give you a great confidence boost. Two is it's going to allow you to go back and re-hit those principles that you've had to try to incorporate into everything else. Go back to the basics, try it again, see if you did better. And then do the same thing with your walk cycle. Your first walk cycle you made may not be the best thing on earth. Go remake another one, try a different type, try it with a different personality, things along those lines. But just keep doing, I think, is going to be the
Yeah.
biggest thing that can do um, in
I
every
wish,
industry. Okay.
yeah, I wish someone had told me exactly that when I was after I finished school, because
Mhm.
it's funny. I went exactly through that thing where I finished school and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna send my reel to Pixar and DreamWorks,
Mhm.
and I did, and I got
Mhm.
rejected many
Right.
times, and it's the reality of how hard animation is,
Mhm.
and it's like it's a never ending learning journey that never ends. I'm
Yeah.
still to this day, I'm still learning stuff, and I'm still learning from my colleagues, from the YouTube or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
there's always something new that you can learn, even if it's not just like animation, or it might be technical, it might be like a whatever, a big strain, a big script or something, whatever.
Right. Right.
But there's always something new to learn, and I wish that I'd known exactly what you were talking about back then, because I kind of got it. I got cocky in a way when I thought,
Right.
"Oh yeah, I got this," and then it was kind of a cold realization that I didn't. I didn't.
Right.
I was like, and it took me a few years before I realized that I had to go back and redo my assignments and redo my walk cycles and redo
Mhm.
my stuff, because it's like you need to perfect your craft, and you
Yeah.
keep working on it. Yeah.
Yeah, so another part of this is going to be continued education throughout your career as well. It may not be in a formal setting like Vertex School or another university or something
Yeah.
along those lines, but it can be and I've talked about this a lot in the last half week as well. is it can be as much as picking up a bird anatomy book and looking at that and going, oh, cool. Like now I can understand, the physics of how a bird walks, the anatomy of how a bird flies, all
Yeah,
of these different things. And while I may not use it now, like at some point, I'm probably going to animate a bird, and I'm going to have some knowledge already there for me. Um, you also spoke a lot about visual effects and moving into animation. One of the things that I think is probably benefiting you pretty greatly is the fact that you have worked in effects. So when you're working with a scene that might have a lot of visual effects, if you're working with somebody swimming that's splashing water, or you're working with a scene where you have to run in or around fire, or really any amount of visual effects, you can go and work with that department a little bit more clearly. And you say, okay, what I'm thinking is maybe we have an emitter actually on the hand. So when he's pushing it through the smoke, it actually creates another kind of different cloud of smoke. You can come up with these ideas with the visual effects department to
yeah,
ultimately come out with an even better product than you thought you were going to be able to create. And you don't have to
absolutely.
be a master, of all those other things. Like I'm sure he's, Robbie is a really great visual effects artist, but, you know, at the same time, you don't have to be a pro at it. But I did the same thing. I went and actually took visual effects classes while I was an animator because I wanted to understand what the people around me were doing. I actually fell greatly in love with visual effects at that time. A lot of pre-rendered stuff. I was following I forget his name, but he's a really huge name in visual effects. But anyways, he was throwing he does classes online, still does classes online, and I got in love. I fell in love with making things explode and catch fire and water running and all this fun stuff. Um, in the end, I found it. It wasn't for me. I was going to need a lot more education into it than I thought. I thought the gap was going to be smaller than it was, and I started to perfect my animation a little bit more at the time as well. So I ended up falling behind with that stuff and just continuing on with my animation. But I've also taken programming classes in things like Python because Maya has you can run Python scripts and things along
Yeah,
those lines. So I was like, you know what? Like, I want to learn a little bit of something so that if I need to ask for a tool, like a new exporting tool that maybe cleans up curves or, runs a Euler filter or whatever else on the curves before it exports, um, I don't want to have to run to a different department and ask for something all the time. So I like to try and be as self-sufficient as I can with really obviously tiny tasks. I'm not going to go make a game engine in order to try to be able to animate, but I might make a script that may automatically create some locators and automatically attach my foot to those locators on certain frames, something like that. Um, so I went and I learned that stuff. So when I do ask for something, I have an idea of what I'm asking for and how
yeah,
it may be able to be achieved. Um, so it's not that I'm a pro in any of those things, but it's helped me in my career in other ways than just sitting and setting keys. Now, at the same time, sitting and setting keys is also really, really important. As anybody will tell you, there's that whole 10,000 hours thing. Do
yeah,
anything for 10,000 hours and you're going to be a pro at it. And that's something I take to heart too, is if I'm feeling low about myself with my animation or with something else that I can or cannot do, I go and educate myself on that particular thing because it's only going to help me later down the line, even if I don't need it right now. Having some level of knowledge of something uh, that the rest of your departments may use or you may use in the future, it's never wasted. And any kind of, I honestly, I don't think any kind of education's ever wasted. I learned about photography just so I would learn lighting and framing and cinematography
yeah,
a little bit better. I'm not animating, but I understand color theory a little bit better. I understand lighting a little bit better. So now when I'm working with my environmental artists who are doing all the lighting, I can say it might be really cool to not have a light at that door. So when I come through, it kind of like scans my person into the scene because it's so
exactly. Yeah,
dark into light. And we can bounce these ideas off of each other, and it's just going to make a better product. So
for sure.
you really do get out of this industry what you put in 100%, and it's only going to help you further. People who do
Yeah,
this more than I do, I greatly regard them, hold them in high regards. That is, I worked with one gentleman who I interviewed last week, and he, he went from being a senior animator to a lead animator to now he's an animation director at a really, really big studio. And the only way he was able to do that is because he paid attention to what everyone else's fields do, because that's what a lead does. And then a director is working with all of the different fields, making sure,
Yeah.
they're all working as a team. And if you just sit and make keys, you'll never make it to that level because you have to be able to work with all these other departments. Sorry, that was really a long-winded answer and ripped off of what you said.
No. But it's all absolutely valid points. It's exactly what you said, and I guess in a way, back then I didn't study like effects or modeling or lighting because of this, but in retrospect, it's like it really helped me understand the whole pipeline and how the whole process works, so that I can do my job even better. Because I know what other departments are supposed to do, or what to look for, or what potential problems might come up if I do something wrong in a way. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
So one of the first things I think I really learned when I first got in, and that I never really thought about before, was, and at the time, when I first started in games, most games were coming out on discs. They weren't a digital thing that you download, so they could be, 30 gigs big or otherwise that we have these days. Back then, when we had discs that you had to actually put it into a console or into a PC and install, we only had a set amount of space. And that was something I had to learn very early on, was if we can make one animation work for two different things, we're going to try and do that to save that memory space and that physical disk space. And, in learning that, I started understanding why we needed to compress animations and why we needed to clean, have Euler filters and remove data and things like that, because it's just my animation that might only be 100K may have been exporting at like 2 megs because I had so much extra information in there it didn't need or otherwise. So it really does benefit you to learn about all those different aspects.
Absolutely.
I actually have a question that came in, if you'd like to answer it.
Absolutely.
It says,
yeah, sure.
Have you worked much with new real-time visual effects workflows like Unreal, real-time facial / body capture, etc.? And where do you see that going as far as future animation?
That's a very, very good question. I have worked with performance capture and facial capture in a couple of films, just because, actually, even more than a couple. Thinking, was this? It's like nowadays, if you have a fully photorealistic character in a film, it's gonna be driven by facial performance, because if you want like really, really like accurate movement with all the muscles and everything, it just needs that. There's no other way. I mean, you could, yes, in theory, animate it, like, and keyframe it, and I'm sure it could hold up and look awesome, but it will take like 10 times longer to get the same result. Real-time stuff, I haven't actually had the opportunity to work with yet. But like you were saying, because of the whole Unreal thing and the way things are moving I sense that might come up in the next, I don't know, 5-10 years, or even sooner.
I would say probably sooner, to be honest. I don't know if a lot of people know about this, but Disney, with the new Mandalorian series, most of, if not all of the effects and animation and stuff like that is all running in real time, if I remember that correct.
It is, yeah. I think I'm not gonna get in trouble talking about it, because I think it's all out there. But yes, there's I'm pretty sure there's like a video of showcasing the whole stagecraft stuff that ILM has been doing with real time. But that's mostly I mean, we as animators, we don't really get to work with that kind of stuff.
Right.
There are people that actually do go on set and they get to create. It's mostly like environments, real time, or like it could be, effects and stuff like that,
Yeah.
just to give the director the flexibility to shoot real time and to see what the environment where the actors are going to be
Mm-hmm.
in real time, and it's like in camera, which is mind blowing.
It really
Um,
is.
it's insane. It's insane. The first time they showed that, I was like, wait, what? This is not like a green screen. This is like LED panels and stuff. It's insane. Um, yeah. So in a way, you're right. It's already there. But what I was trying to say is that I think that animation wise, it's not there yet. It's not something that we're gonna be doing yet, um, especially in visual effects. But
Yeah.
for like previes and stuff like that, yes, that's been going on for a while. I remember when I was on set a few years ago, there were already a few of us that were kind of almost doing real time animations. Not real time per se, but like, okay, I'm gonna make this change and then like projected right away in the
Mm-hmm.
in the in the virtual environment,
Right.
um, and just see what it looks like, what it feels like, and then we say, oh, can you slow down the spaceship, or can you, that kind of stuff. That's already been going on for a few years now,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm sure that's gonna evolve into something more complex, especially with the help of Unreal, that's been showing that like real time stuff. It's getting incredibly fast to work with, which is the thing that kind of was the bottleneck in the past. Was
Right.
like that's it takes time. You need to wait, and it's like the FPS. It's not that good. And
Right.
it's like this doesn't look that realistic, but now it does, and so I think it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, especially with advancements in VR and AR and new game engines that are capable of running things the way they are, um, I think we have a lot of big changes coming. And I think, like a lot of new animators, and when I was a new animator, one of the first big things that came our way was motion capture. And at
Hmm.
first, I was really scared because I'm like, I just spent all this time and money and years learning how to animate, and I'm being replaced. But obviously that wasn't the case. We've only created more animation jobs, and now we just have different animation jobs with motion capture and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I honestly think I have some friends who are into high-end programming, and they're going into machine learning and AI and all those fun things. And that stuff is bleeding into the video game industry now as well, where you can start to teach what am I trying to look for here? Like basically teach the engine, hey, if my foot is here and not here, and then you kind of go through all the different steps, and we go into a different animation, blend this part but not this part, and then that part with this part but not that part, and we're starting to get an AI that can actually start to do those things for us instead of us having to always go in and figure out at what degree is the person holding their joystick, and we're going to switch to this animation or this
Yeah.
animation and blend from this one to the other one. um, in those realms, we're starting to get to AI learning how that kind of stuff works, making our jobs again even easier. But it's also starting to use less animations because it's able to pick and choose what it wants a little bit easier out of these databases that you can use. Um, I think the future of what can be accomplished in animation in a very short future is going to be pretty dramatic. I mean, we're talking about you can take photos and stuff and make a 3D model out of it now, instead
Yeah.
of having to spend a day, 2 days, 3 days, however long it would take a modeler to make this phone. You can now take a picture of it, a few pictures of it, and it's just a 3D object already.
Yeah.
So the really cool thing about that is, for one, as we mentioned earlier, always continuing our education, which is going to keep it fresh for you, which is going to keep you excited about it. Um, and at the same exact time, your job might slightly change, and that's also going to be really exciting. Being able to do something else, but still being able to use your craft. Um, like motion capture artists, they may have started off doing keyframe animation stuff, and their job changed more into motion capture, and their job isn't any less difficult than anybody else's. It's just a little bit different. They have to exaggerate something that came from real life and make it into something that is appealing to actually watch, versus they should have just used a camera on somebody, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff for me is still really appealing, simply because they still get to work with their craft. It's just a different way of working with it. To me, it's like stop motion versus keyframe, 3D animation versus 2D animation. I think motion capture and working with text, like AI and otherwise, is just another way for you to express the same thing. It's just a different tool to get there. So
Yeah,
that's how I
totally.
feel
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's the same. Yeah.
just real quick, we will continue to field questions. If you guys get those into us, we'll continue to answer that. We're probably only going to be at this a short while longer. So please, if you do have any questions, get those in. We do have our guy filtering through some of the best ones. So please ask those as you can. So with seeing where your career had led you, and knowing how it started and how it went through and all that kind of stuff, thinking about that with students that are currently in school today, how would you say you may have changed the way that you went through school, or what maybe was the thing that you wish you had learned the most of when you were in school, that may help you in your career further down the line? If that question made sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I think that first of all, I think students that are starting now, the I think like compared to when we started, probably they had such a they had an easier life. Let's put it that way. Just
Mhm.
because there's the amount of information out there is insane. I mean, you can Google something if you're stuck, like you don't know how to do something, you just Google it and you will find the answer to it. So
Mhm.
that I think they are already in a better position that we were like 15 years ago, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
just because the amount of the just because it's so easy to find this information and to learn and to keep refining your craft and find out
Yeah.
what you need to know to get into this industry. It's just it's out there. It's anybody can reach that information.
It's
And so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it really is a wildly different world from when you and
Yeah.
I pretty much started animating to, animators starting out today. Go ahead and finish your
Yeah, I don't
sentence.
know. I was just gonna say that the only one thing that I wish someone had told me maybe like 15 years ago would probably be uh, just to understand that the it's not just like a, a straight journey in a straight line. It's
Mm-hmm.
like accept that you might need to adapt and learn new things as you go along,
Mm-hmm.
and there might be things that will be challenging, and they will that they will make you cry sometimes. It's like you just want to, that's why I'm bald. I'm like, I have no more hair to pull. It's like you understand that,
I do.
but yeah, just jokes aside, it's just it's just like at the time I thought, oh yeah, okay, I want to do this and I'm gonna do this, and I'm like, such a long time I wanted to do feature animation. That was my thing. I was like, this is why I'm studying animation. I want to do the next Pixar movie.
Yeah.
And then in the end, I'm like, but actually, I'm happy that I went through all those different kind of paths and journeys, and I got to work on cool games, on really really cool movies, and I'm happy that it went that way because I've learned something new each time,
Yeah.
and every company I've learned something new, and that was the and I got like real value from those companies and those experiences.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, I mean, I don't know if that answered your questions, but it's just like something that I wish someone had told me. It's like just chill, just go with the flow and follow whatever chance that may be thrown at you, and just like take it and learn something from it,
Yeah.
and then just move on to the next thing, because that's the way it is, and that's the way that it's going to be helpful for like students starting now. It's if you want to really work in games, but you only get to work on, I don't know, it's the TV show, so be it. I mean, just do it. It's You're gonna learn something from it, and you're gonna refine your animation skills as you keep going, and then eventually you're gonna be moving on to the next step. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna go move a step closer to working in games.
Hmm.
And that's the thing. That for me, that's the way I would approach it now. I will
Yeah.
be more flexible and think, okay, this is not what I want to do, but I'm gonna learn as much as possible from it, and then take it from there,
Yeah.
and keep learning and keep refining. That's my thing.
Yeah. So you actually hit on something that for one, is kind of funny, and then for two is a really great point that I'd like to kind of point out. And that was back actually when you and I were first learning. And for me, I'm going to take this back to high school. When I was in high school, that's when you're first trying to figure out exactly what do you want to do with your life. At the time, I loved video games, and I mean, I still love video games. But my love for video games and for some of the really early 3D films that were coming out and things along those lines, for me, that's what I wanted. But in the 90s, when I was asking these types of questions, I lived in a very rural countryside town in the middle of nowhere, where we had one school for like, 5 different sending districts, but we still only had, 100 students in my graduating class. So when I started asking questions like that, like, oh, I really want to get into this, I really want to, get into games or get into film, that type of stuff. This is where the funny part comes in. We didn't have Google then either. We had like stuff like Yahoo that didn't work very well. But
Yeah,
Googling something is beyond when I started actually animating. So
yeah,
that's actually how I became a computer engineer. Funny enough, is because I went to people that I knew and said I would love to get into making games and doing that kind of stuff, and they were just like, "Oh, you want to learn about computers then?" I'm like, okay, I guess that's what I need to learn, and that actually pushed me down in this engineering realm, which is why obviously it didn't stick, and I no longer work with the government, and I am an animator and all that kind of stuff. It's because the knowledge was so incomplete in the
mm,
90s when I started getting into this. I couldn't even figure out which direction was the right direction to start. um, but I also do not hold my past against me at all for going down that career path, because now that I have such an engineering way of thinking about a lot of things, it's helped me out with the technical side of issues that we run into, and it also helps me out when I get a really interesting different thing like a 11-legged character. The engineering side of my brain likes to think about like, what is the math behind each step that I have to make. If it can step this far and I need it to go this far in this period of time, how fast do my legs have to move? I like
nice.
figuring out that mathematics and stuff like that. But it was just what I wanted to say was, back then trying to get other information may not be like it is today, when, as Robbie had mentioned, was it's all available now. Like if you can think something up, someone has a web page or a video or something
Yeah,
about it right now. um, and when you're dealing with something like games, Unreal or Unity or Maya or 3D Studio Max or Blender or any of these, every single one of these applications is absolutely ginormous. I guarantee you there's no one out there in any of these applications that knows how and a good way to use every tool within inside of every one of these, even people that work at the places that make these softwares, because there's just so big and so robust that there's
yeah,
just no way to learn all of it. So these days, I'll have a student ask me a question. What's the first thing I do if I don't know it? I go and Google it and I look it up and then I give them that answer back, you know. Um, it just there's just such a plethora of information out there if you know the right
Yeah.
questions to ask. And um, it's just it can be so wildly beneficial to you. Like if you're just having a small little issue, just go look it up, man. There could be a million different ways to do it, and then you've just further educated yourself. Um,
Absolutely.
I do want to get a couple more questions in here.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
given that you've worked in both films and games, which do you like more, working in film or game? And what is the best part of either or both?
That's a question that I've asked myself many times
Mm-hmm.
when I was trying to figure out what I like most. And I think that I definitely, by far, I like working in visual effects more than I did in video games,
Mm-hmm.
simply because, um, unlike you, Dan, I am not very good at math and like I'm technical, and like if I need to do like something technical in like in Maya or in my shots and stuff, I'm game. I don't dread doing that.
Right.
But I remember vividly how much I didn't like working in the engine and like setting up the animations and blending them, and
Mm-hmm.
especially because I worked. There was a time where I was working. I mean, I worked with Unreal and one of my experiences in games, and then in another studio, which was Crytek,
Mm-hmm.
I worked with the Cry engine, and that was like a whole different beast. And was like it was a thing they were still developing as they were working on the game,
Mm-hmm.
and they were finishing up Crisis back then, and I joined to work on a new game, which was Homefront
Mm-hmm.
2, and I had to learn the whole engine in such a short amount of time, and I was there for maybe, I don't know, like 2.5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I like by the time when I left, I still had things that I couldn't understand. I was like, and luckily it wasn't just me. It was across the whole animation team. Was like, this is really complex stuff, and we
Yeah.
had one guy who knew exactly like how to work the engine. He was like the guy, and we were constantly asking him questions. Um, and that's the only reason why I kind of always preferred films, just because in films you kind of you do the animation and that's it. You don't have to worry about, well, you have to worry about other stuff that is
Right.
still kind of challenging. But
Mm-hmm.
for me personally, I kind of prefer visual effects just because of that over games.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I always loved about working in movies was the fact that in a way I kind of, because I think it's because I've loved the whole pipeline. I love the lighting, the comp, the rendering and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like seeing your animation rendered with all the bells and whistles and like the all the details and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's so satisfying. It's just like it's this you animate a shot of the Hulk, and then you see it in scene. It's like, oh, that looks awesome. And it's just, I know my son's stupid, but that's, for me it's like seeing the whole thing big in the theater
Mm-hmm.
compared to a game. I don't know. I got more satisfaction out of it. That's as simple as that. Yeah, and it's just more fun for me.
So you kind of hit on a couple of things that I want to say here. Is you mentioned like the technical side of it and things
Yeah,
like that. But what it really comes down to, the art of animation, and we talked about this before as well, is the art inside of both games and in film are identical as far
oh yeah,
as body mechanics and weight and timing and all of
absolutely,
that stuff. So if you truly love the craft of animation, I think you could really be happy in both. Um,
absolutely, yeah.
when I started my education in animation, I did the same thing as you. Is even though I loved games, I always saw the movies that I fell in love with Disney and Pixar early on, and those things. that's exactly what I wanted to do too. I was like, I want to go and I want to work on that stuff. That's the thing that I want to work toward. By the time I got out of school and I learned more of what animation was and how they are put together, and games versus film, things along those lines. At the very end, I ended up, it was, games weren't on my radar, and it was like, I'm going to make a Disney film, right? And then as I kind of got through, I got to about this point right at the end where I was like, I don't know which way I want to go, because it was just, I'm going to be able to animate and I'm going to be able to make something cool. And no matter what I make, a lot of people are going to see it. Actually, the first two job offers that I got, one was film and one was in games. And I got to say, that was one of the hardest choices at that time for me, was which direction do I go? Is this going to line up the rest of my career? Which, as you
Yeah.
know, obviously, if I wanted to get into film, I could work my way to get toward film right now. And you being in film and have already been in games, you could work your way back to games if you wanted to. There's, it's two paths of essentially almost the same thing. It's just there's slight differences. One thing I can say I really love about working with film stuff or cinematic level stuff, this is going to sound bad, but it's the cheating. I love the
Yeah.
fact that you can cheat things, whether it's outside a screen, like I moved my hand down here and I moved it back up, but it actually translated 15 feet,
I
silly
agree.
things
Yeah.
like that.
I know
I'm
that's
I'm
yeah.
sitting
You
here
can
doing
get away
this.
with many, many, many things. Whereas in
Right,
games, you're like, it needs to look good from any angle.
right.
You're screwed. You're just like it's just like it needs to look great from everywhere. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's exactly that. Yeah.
I both love and hate that different aspect. Like I love it
Oh
in
yeah.
games because I'm like, I have to think about this in more of a spatial idea than a flat 2D screen. And I love that about the game part, but I love the thinking and having done some cinematic stuff of, I can cheat stuff. If I'm animating a guy from here up, his legs are going across the screen just sliding. And the knees are popping and the legs are breaking and the body's just kind of bobbing because
Unless
all.
unless there's like a really, really unforgiving lighting where you can see the
Okay.
shadow of the
Oh,
legs.
right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you're
Yeah.
like, oh, why didn't you animate the legs? And I'm like, because you couldn't see them from the camera. It's like that could happen. And it did happen to me. Yeah.
Okay. I've never thought of that before. Thank you for bringing that
Yeah.
up. Yeah,
It's
that's
but
cool.
that's the thing is like it's honestly just life. It happened once,
Yeah.
just because it's one of those like really weird scenarios where they're like you need to think about the lighting, but we had no idea that the lighting was going to look that way, and then in the end it kind of uh you know it came back to us. It's like you
Yeah.
need to fix this. Yeah, animate the legs.
Okay. We're almost at an hour now. I do want to wrap this up. Let's just do one more question if we can do it quicker
Yeah.
than we have the others. I'm just going to pick a random one here. Hi, what do you think about the difficult balance between rigging, skinning, and animating, and having to sometimes, quote unquote, do all together plus camera work, game specifically? So it sounds like he's asking,
Hmm.
balancing between being a master of all, or a jack of all trades and a master of none. It kind of sounds
Right.
like that. I'm not. I wouldn't be great at answering this because I've primarily been an animation specialist and not had to do a lot of rigging, skinning, and things like that. I did at my first job. I had to do some rigging, no modeling, no lighting, no camera work, but I did have to do some rigging in my very first job, which was actually in, if I remember correctly, 3D Studio Max.
Hmm.
So I'm not great at answering that question, but if you think you'd like to field it, go for it.
No, I'm like you. I've kind of specialized in one thing, and I only do animation. I
Hmm.
can create a joint and maybe skin it, and it's
Hmm.
gonna look bad, but it's not my thing. It's not. I've never been. I mean, I did try it out, man,
Hmm.
when I was learning the whole thing, but for me, I'm more of the school of thoughts of
Specialist.
just focus on one thing and be the best you can be, because that's going to be more helpful. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Unless you are aiming to work in like a smaller studio, then they might wanna look for a generalist where you can do a bit of everything, and then you're set then.
Yeah, so I can speak on it now, I guess, because I thought about it, like as you mentioned it, is I'm also, animation specialist. I really honed my craft down one direction. I did mention, no, I educated myself a little bit, like Robbie did on the rigging and skinning and things like that, but it's not something we really specialized in. A
Yeah,
lot of your bigger studios, your ILMs, your Disneys, your Pixars, your Blizzards, a lot of the EA studios, things like that, they're going to be very specialized and they're going to
yeah,
hire you for a very particular thing. There's also different types of animators as well. You'll end up finding out.
yeah,
Some people are really good at animating, buildings falling and objects, and some people are good at creatures, and some people are good at humans, and all this
yeah,
different level stuff. And a lot of people will specialize down one direction of any of those given things. Um, but then you have smaller studios, indie studios who may not have, $100,000 to pay this guy, another $100,000 to pay this guy, another hundred
yeah,
thousand to pay that one, and they go, okay, we need somebody to do the rigging, we need somebody to do the animating, and then we're going to need somebody to animate the cameras, right? So that's cinematography, a technical artist, and an animator, all of those together kind of wrapped into one. But that's what that studio is able to do, and it's what that studio, maybe just the way that studio likes to
yeah,
run anyway. And I've been at studios, I've not hired, I've interviewed with places, and I had to be very honest with them. Like they're like, oh, so how good are you at this, and how good are you at that? And I was like, no, I'm more of a specialist. I don't
yeah,
really know rigging. I don't think you want to see me rig anything. So basically what I'm going to say, and I would imagine Robbie would kind of follow me up, is you have to aim for what it is that you want. If you want to be a
yeah,
specialist at a big studio, really hone your craft in on that particular thing. For us, obviously, animation. If you would like to dip your toes into a lot of different things and have maybe more creative freedoms, places like indie studios are going to be a really great option for you. Um, and absolutely try to learn a little bit more of all these other things. You should still try to specialize a little bit though, because you will find that you're going to primarily spend your time on one of those tasks more than the others. But I just say you have to kind of aim for what you want. If I wanted to be the best bicyclist in the world, am I also going to learn how to run and swim and do all those other things? Probably not. But if I want to be a great bicyclist, but I also want to do some running and swimming on the side, then absolutely I need to learn those things on top of it. So it's really just what is your goal and then aiming for that goal. So
absolutely.
again, another
Yeah.
really winded question or answer rather, but I do want to wrap up. We're over an hour now. Robbie,
Cool.
thank you so much for coming and
Oh, thank you.
sharing
It was a
an
pleasure.
awesome, yeah, sharing this awesome conversation, answering a few of our questions from people watching. So I greatly appreciate that. As per usual, everybody, we will be continuing this through the week. And as I mentioned before, on Friday, we will have those real reviews. Please get those up. I'm seeing a whole bunch of thank yous popping up, by the way, Robbie. So everybody's
Cool.
appreciating you just as much as I am. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody,
guys.
for coming by. Robbie is do you currently have some students with us? You do, right?
I have two. Yeah,
You have two
I do.
students with us
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
So Robbie is one of our one-on-one mentors here, and we have a lot of other really great mentors. So if you'd like to learn from people as amazing as Robbie is, please go on over to Vertex School and get signed up. Thank you guys all so much.
Yes.
Robbie, again, thank you so
Thank you,
much for
Dan.
taking
It's been
time
a
today.
pleasure, man. Yeah.